the number of new materials, the number of product prototypes, the number of patent filings has actually skyrocketed since generative AI has come out. No matter who owns Intel, it's a really tough business to invest in. I can't imagine a world where our president is an AI, for example. I can't imagine a world where the coach of a great baseball team is an AI. The AI market is growing much faster than the amount of chips that are being produced. When OpenAI goes public, it'll be worth $16 trillion. You can't just pick up and move TSMC into the States. GPUs are going to run the world for a very long time. My name is Alex. I run a channel called Ticker Symbol U that focuses on investing in innovation, specifically in AI, software, and hardware. I was a rocket scientist for a long time before that. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about all things investing, AI, and chips, semiconductors.
Thank you so much for being here. It's such a joy. I started watching your channel sometime in 2020. Everybody got locked up at home, and there was just a few channels I watched in kind of like the tech/investing space. Yours is one of them, so it's amazing to meet you. You know, one of the coolest things that I saw is at some point you were sitting down with Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of Nvidia, which that must have been an absolute amazing experience. But yeah, I mean, a few people. He seems like an amazing person. You want to just tell us a little bit about him? He's a legend at this point.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, he's super down to earth. He's very casual, so he has a big presence because he does these big keynotes all over the world all the time. And then the stage kind of warps around him and he's bringing on all sorts of hardware, robots, giant server racks. So it's easy to think that he's larger than life, but funny enough, so I'm 5'7" and Jensen is like my height. So when you actually look at him, he's actually like this small guy, but he's got like this larger than life presence even offline, right? So I get to go to these press analyst briefings after every keynote, and I get to ask him a question, usually related to the keynote or something that Nvidia has unveiled at large that season. And he'll spend some time directly answering every person's question, clarifying technology, sort of clarifying the roadmap, helping people understand the overall AI thesis. So I get to learn a lot because I get to sit there with a bunch of analysts who are frankly much smarter than me. And then I get to ask one question of my own and I get a direct response from Jensen, which is pretty cool. So that's happened 2 or 3 times now. So I won't say he knows me by name, but he might recognize my face at this point, which is probably the coolest thing that'll ever happen to me. But yeah, so it's really great. And usually what I tend to do is I try to ask questions that are more broad and far reaching. So a little less oh, what does this piece of this chip do? And a little more hey, what is the big vision for AI 2, 3, 5 years out? And how is Nvidia tackling that vision versus a company like Broadcom, a company like AMD, a company like Google, right? What does the ecosystem look like over the next few years? And so he has a lot of insights on that. Unfortunately, we're not allowed to record those sessions because they are impromptu responses. He doesn't have time to prepare, but we're allowed to talk about his answer. I just never get any video footage of it, so.
So
Yeah.
what are you kind of thinking about the way he runs a company and how it fits into the broader ecosystem? I mean, I would love just a huge 10,000 foot overview of where hardware and the mega companies are and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so let me try to tackle those two questions separately, right? So I think Nvidia is one of the best run companies on the planet. So as an investor, I tend to look at things like revenue per employee, right? So if you make a lot of money as a company, but you have to feed a lot of employees to do it, your overall revenue per employee tends to be pretty low, right? If your headcount is extremely high. One of the special things about Nvidia is they make a lot of money, especially for the size of company they are, right? So they're 2 or 3 or 4 times smaller than a Microsoft, a Meta Platforms, a Google, and they make, on par with those revenues, right? So maybe ex Amazon Web Services, which is $100 billion company all on its own. It's absolutely insane. So I do think Nvidia is a very well-run company. And one of the reasons why is it's so flat. I think the statistics are something Jensen has 50 direct reports, which is very different from the way other CEOs run their business, where they'll have a couple VPs and then VPs under them and then directors under them, and things kind of flow up. With Jensen, it seems like he's always in the high level meetings because he has so many people reporting directly to him. So he's always more connected and aware of what's going on, right? To your second question, I think the 10,000 foot view of hardware is an interesting one, right? So in my opinion, GPUs are going to run the world for a very long time. I think we're moving away from the age of the CPU and towards the age of like parallel computing and GPUs. And then just last week, there was a big discussion about will it be GPUs or will it be something like ASICs, application specific integrated circuits, which is like Google's TPU or this new Broadcom OpenAI XPU that just got announced last week. Really like niche down focused chips that are very, very performant, but only on a few specific kinds of workloads, right? Where GPUs are very broad. You know, we use them in video games, we use them to power ChatGPT, we use them to power all sorts of scientific computing. They can be applied in a lot of places at the cost of not being the most performant in any one of those areas. So let me stop there. And then if I need to clarify or if you want to ask like a, you know, different kind of question around the ecosystem, I'm happy to like dive deep into a specific area.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, that's one of the things that we're trying to make sure we understand very, very well, because there seems to be, Nvidia right now is kind of the undisputed king. And there's often, that you hear other people coming in, like in 2023, I think it was, Sam Altman was trying to fund a few chip companies. One of them was a neuromorphic chip. And then you also have these, of course, GPUs from Google, Grok, the chip company. They're also doing a lot. So,
Yeah.
So I guess what you're saying is GPUs, basically, they can be used to run training. They can be used to run inference and whatever else that you want. But I mean, if the big bottleneck is training, is there a training specific chip, or is that not even like a thing?
Yeah. No, so that's a great question. So there are training specific chips. Amazon actually has a chip called Trainium. You know, they have
Okay.
their Trainium chips for training and they have their Inferentia chips for inference, right?
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
that's a good example of like one. And I think that's actually one of the only examples that's purely for training. So you're spot on. That would be an example of an ASIC, an application specific integrated circuit, but for the training side of AI, not the inference side, right? What's really interesting is Jensen has this point of view, and I'm starting to agree like the more I do my own research, but Jensen has this point of view, which I should mention, I can't ever speak for Jensen, right? I've just been in the room with him a couple times. But B, his view is pretty biased towards GPU because he runs the biggest GPU company on the planet, right? So it's like good to call that out and remember it. But in Jensen's view, AI training and inference will one day be one process, not two.
Right.
And the reason for that is if you think about how the human brain works is you learn something and you implement it almost right away. You know, we have a really good pattern recognition, which is both a training step in recognizing a new pattern and an inference step in immediately applying that pattern to the next thing that we see with that pattern, right? Like I can give you 10 pictures of cats, right? And then an 11th picture and you can immediately tell me if it's a cat or a dog in the same like minute that I've given you the 10 training photos, right?
Right. It's not like you have to go to sleep first and then wake up and then you recognize it.
You don't have to finish the model, bake
Mhm.
it into a chip, right? So overall, you know, between real-time human feedback, like RLHF, between different kinds of like automated learning methods, deep learning methods, there's a lot of ways to make AI models better without retraining them from scratch. And so the idea is kind of like this idea of like continuous development, continuous integration, and continuous deployment in regular software engineering. Will have this like continuous learning happen in AI models, and they'll be fine tuning themselves as they get more inference workloads and like they're basically learning on the job, right? It's the equivalent of learning on the job instead of going to school, getting trained, and then applying that knowledge. We're moving to a learning on the job environment, according to Jensen. That's probably the best analogy I can come up with.
So sometimes you see things that are small, but they clearly look like they're going to be the future. They're sort of disruptive technologies. I mean, you could think of an early day of Tesla where it just seemed like eventually electric makes a lot of sense and the big car companies aren't moving as fast. Sometimes I hear about these breakthroughs in hardware that seem to be light-based or quantum-based or sometimes just different random architectures that hierarchical architectures, I guess.
Yeah.
Do you get a sense that something growing is the next big thing, or does it all sort of feel pretty R&D at this point and really the traditional silicon is the next 5 or 10 years of serious server growth?
I tend to be in the camp it's traditional silicon, and the reason for that is actually pretty interesting. So, when you're talking about like neuromorphic computing chips, right? Chips that try to really mimic the human brain, or you're talking about ASICs or whatever, like the chip itself can be great. The problem is it's not the best specs that usually win, right? Like we kind of know this with iPhones. So like I'm going to answer it two ways. Let me do the intuitive way first, and then we'll talk about like the what's actually happening in the industry. iPhones, do you guys have iPhones or Androids? I'm just curious.
Android for me.
Yeah, iPhone.
Yeah, okay, iPhone and Android, right? So I tend to find that most of my friends have iPhones, and when I asked them why, zero of them have said that it's because of the specs of the phone, that it's the best phone, it's the best hardware, right? Like pure, you're not going to do better. Zero people say that. In fact, the Google Pixel, I think the One Pluses, the Samsungs all have better specs on paper. What the iPhone has is it in quotes, like, I was an Android user for a long time. iPhone have the best ecosystem. They have the best user interface, the most friendly apps, everything's secure, it works out of the box. You just pick it up, get your data and go, right? I think the chip ecosystems kind of work the same way. There are better chips for lots of different workloads than standard GPUs. What they're all missing is the ecosystem built on top of those chips. So Nvidia has a big ecosystem called CUDA. CUDA is a language for developing parallel programming and parallelizing traditionally like serial programming, which is just a fancy way of saying like instead of computing things one at a time, you can compute a whole bunch of things in parallel, combine your computations, and get the output faster, right? NVIDIA's ecosystem is what's really hard to replace. It's not that they have the best specs, even though like their Blackwell GPUs, their Rubin specs, their Feynman specs that they've released so far all look incredible. It's really all the ecosystem they've built on top of that that's going to stop them from being displaced by a quantum computer that's adopted in one lab somewhere that no one can develop for if they're not one of the researchers on that chip. There's so much more that goes into building software and firmware and infrastructure around a chip than the chip's specs itself. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but
Yeah.
usually when a company does have an ecosystem that big, other companies have a lot of money and incentive to compete. But yeah, so you'd think someone like Microsoft 5 or 10 years ago would have been like, this looks like $1 trillion opportunity. We should go after it. But,
Yeah.
Obviously that's easier said than done.
And they were chasing other ecosystems. It's not like
Yeah.
Microsoft is a bad company
Mhm.
and they missed the boat. It's like they were busy combining all of their Windows operating systems into one coherent operating system and deploying that on an Xbox and a server and a PC and a Windows phone. Like they were just chasing other things, much to their success. Like Azure is an incredible AI business. It's just not the same AI business as NVIDIA.
So, and then also, I mean, yeah, like you said, it's a huge ecosystem. One of the things I'm super interested in is their robotics slash simulation, Isaac, Jim, all of that stuff.
Yeah,
I really enjoy watching talks by Dr. Jim Fan. He's just absolutely incredible talking about
he's
like kind
awesome.
of, oh yeah, I love it. He explains everything in such a easy to understand way, and the ideas are so big. They were, I gotta say, a lot of the big stuff that we see with AI now, he and his team were one of the first people putting stuff out with Minecraft Voyager, for example. And then Eureka, where basically it took GPT, ChatGPT, GPT-4 at the time, like the original
Yeah.
thing, and they got it to train robots in a simulation in this kind of a recursive fashion where it would get feedback and it would keep improving. And like reading those papers, that was very early on too. I was so blown away. I'm like, wow. Um, so like, what do you think about that whole side of it, right? Because what's their future with robotics? Are they going to be actually manufacturing robotics? The reason I ask is Unitree just is going to IPO pretty soon. I think like 7 billion. That's the Chinese manufacturer. They have 60% of the global
Oh, wow.
robot market for the dogs, the robot dogs. You know what I mean? So they're killing it.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Boston Dynamics was the one that kind of pioneered that technology. They're nowhere to be seen, it seems like. Where's Nvidia going with robotics?
Yeah, so my understanding is Nvidia won't be making any robots themselves, right? They'll be making sort of like the platform that most robots run on, right? So like the brain and the sensor package, maybe some of the like joints and the actuators and things like that, but that's really it. And even that is a stretch. I would say they're making the computers and maybe the eyes of the robot, right? So, um I think there's a lot of precedent for those kind of companies being very successful because what you end up with is a platform that all other robotics end up being built on, kind of like companies that make GPUs but not the entire server, or companies that make CPUs but not the entire computer, or companies that make, engines but not the car, and so on, right? Um, so I think NVIDIA's role, and again, on top of that robot chip, it's a Blackwell chip, by the way, so it's part of the whole Blackwell ecosystem. And it also runs CUDA. So the same developers that can develop for GPUs, like PC GPUs, the same developers that will run on Project Spark can also develop using the same sets of tools for robotics platforms, not just GPUs, PC platforms, and all that kind of stuff. So that's again part of the reason like people might choose NVIDIA's robotics solutions or their self-driving car solutions or their weather simulation solutions or their data center hardware solutions is because like there's a rich ecosystem of developers that have already solved a wide variety of problems and put those solutions in a language that those GPUs can understand.
So knowing that AI agents are going to be coding and getting better, and the companies like NVIDIA, in theory, could even get smaller. They might even have more and more just AI, programmers building a lot of this stuff that they go in the future. Does it worry you that so many of the American investable stocks are so software based? I mean, I think about BYD or DJI and all these Chinese companies. They seem a little closer to our version of Tesla, where there's actually gigafactories, there's actually robotics. And I'm worried that Microsoft and Meta and these companies have just been so software based because that is where the best margins are. But it's not going to be suited for a world of robots, which is going to come hard like so fast and at such high volume soon.
I think that's a really great point, and I think it's a question of whether you believe AI agents will replace people or if you believe AI agents will augment people, right? So I definitely agree with you that if the case is that hey, we're done hiring humans, we're going to start hiring only AI agents and paying for like server capacity and stuff to run them 24/7. They don't need any health benefits. They can just work around the clock and blah blah blah. But my understanding is so far at least the way agents have been working for me is the the creativity and the actual like systems level architecture of solving any problem is actually done by me. And then the implementation of that and like the first cut and save me all the boring steps and all that kind of stuff is run by the agent, right? So like when I've had agents build code for me, which admittedly is like a small sample size, they've built like the scaffolding, the interfaces, like the basic outline of the code and stuff like that, and then worked with me to like actually solve problems function by function, call by call, right? Like get all the right data together in the right order and stuff like that. I haven't really seen it be able to do that kind of stuff on its own from like a single high level prompt. Like, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's the inputs I have. Here's the output I expect. Go. It's a lot more like, hey, here's what I think are the right steps to solve this problem. For each step, help me come up with the code to like move to the next step is like where I've been the most successful. So in that way, I think agents really augment my creativity, do certain things way faster than me, write code, analyze, debug, but certain things they're just incapable of doing at all so far.
Yeah, but what about the hardware side of the companies? Do you think Meta should be actually building a huge factory to build glasses and trying to actually get minerals brought under its control so that in the future it's not overtaken
It's
when
a good
software
question.
can be replaced faster or copied?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know my suspicion is that kind of comes down to like a more economic answer. Like, hey, is it worth it for them to own their entire supply chain from the minerals up, control every nut and bolt in their hardware, or does it make more economic sense to sort of like globalize that supply chain, own all the software because the glasses, you could argue the value is really in the software that runs on them, right? My guess is it's a trade-off of like supply chain resiliency, you know, owning all your own stuff and having full control versus cheaper costs, faster ramp up times, all that kind of stuff. Like It is hard. The thing I've learned from Intel, like following Intel for so long, is it's hard to be a design and manufacturing company, right? It's very hard to design chips and then go build them to spec. So those are very different businesses. My guess is it's the same for the glasses, right? It's easy to sit there and come up with the design. Easy is obviously in big air quotes, but it's very hard to be like, okay, now manufacture 10 million of these with the machines we actually have and get it to work exactly like it is to the spec sheet. My guess is those are very different like
Yeah.
areas of
You know,
competency.
it's so weird because, like, when I imagine the timeline of America, I imagine this sort of like post World War II world where we just were this industrial might, right? Like, it was kind of a war machine, but then it turned into an industrial machine that created all sorts of products like GE and refrigerators and all this stuff America was sort of the best at that time. But then, you know, there's labor is expensive and the whole world has a lot of labor, and you see that kind of move outside the US and all around the world, and you see China build up that sort of next kind of dominant position. But then it seems to me that the third place that we're probably leading towards would be some kind of factory that's like you've heard of a dark factory where like the robots don't even need light because there's
Yeah,
so many
right.
automated arms, there's so much material, and it's all being sort of simulated and controlled by AI. And then it seems like an opportunity to maybe bring some of that manufacturing home and have cost. I mean, it's huge upfront capital, but in the long run, you do the math and you don't have to pay somebody to eat or drink or go to
Right.
sleep, and like it might, you know, hyper, you know, speed up the company's growth in the long run.
Yeah, my sneaking suspicion is you're spot on. My guess is if you're trying to bring back like American jobs, right? So, for example, move semiconductor manufacturing from Taiwan to the United States, just as an example, right? It's going to be incredibly hard to do because American workers in the semiconductor industry are trained completely differently than the ones in Taiwan, and the ones in Taiwan happen to be the ones actually producing all the chips. So my guess is it is going to be something like you just said, where if you can figure out how to automate certain manufacturing things end to end, whether that's chips or cars or smart glasses or just computers, and you can do it in a dark factory, now that might make sense to bring back to America because you're having your cake and you're eating it too. You get all the high quality manufacturing because it's automated, which is an incredibly challenging problem, but you've brought that back home. So you get all the supply chain resiliency. You don't have to pay tariffs. It's an economic benefit to the United States, which is, what all our economic policies lately are trying to accomplish. So I think the dark factory might be the solution to bringing more advanced labor back into the US for sure.
Interesting. So yeah, you've done a few videos recently on tariffs and stuff like that. So you think
Yeah.
there might be something to the site that you mean you're saying maybe over time that will might help bring more manufacturing here on shore in America, right? That's a positive thing potentially.
Yeah, and so just to be clear, the reason it's not so easy, right? Like that would be the dream, right?
Right.
I can build this factory anywhere. It's a fully like I'm drawing the bounds of the factory. It's got its inputs, and no matter where I plant it on Earth, as long as I can get the right things into it, it will produce cars, smart glasses, computers, whatever the output is, right? I'm going to drop that in America. Why? Because I don't want to be subject to the next round of tariffs. I don't want to deal with shipping costs. I don't want to deal with the next pandemic that stops shipping from occurring. I don't want to worry about third party vendors and whether they're breaking international laws. I want to be a resilient supply chain all in one country that's, it's got all of the benefits and none of the drawbacks of having to deal with businesses in many time zones all around the world, right? I think short of that, it's very hard to do that because semiconductors, just as an example, have extremely long lead and extremely complicated supply chains. So when you tariff them, they're not moving to the US. They're going to pass those tariffs as costs onto their customers, right? You can't just pick up and move TSMC into the States. And even the foundries that they are building in the States are only going to be a small fraction of their overall chip production. So all a tariff really accomplishes is increasing the cost of those chips, in my opinion.
So does Intel feel like a good investment to you? I mean, now it's partially owned by the government and it might be too big to fail in some sense if it's more national security reasons,
It's
or no?
yeah. So that's I really think that's a great question. I get asked that a lot. I think no matter who owns Intel, it's a really tough business to invest in. at the end of the day, Intel's job is to design and manufacture chips. Both of those are incredibly hard problems. Doing that individually, right? Doing them both back to back, to me, seems impossible. The rate at which you need to design chips, like even Nvidia, who's hitting this 1-year cadence of like GPU upgrades that are like insane. If Nvidia had to build those chips too, I strongly believe that company would go to zero. It's just too hard of a problem to do the design and get it built yourself all at once.
Why doesn't
TSMC,
it make it?
go ahead.
Why doesn't it make
Go
it
ahead.
easier? Because if you think about Apple designing and doing the hardware, it's a tighter coupled system that you get more control over. Whereas it seems like the hard part is having two different people talking to each other.
Sure, but who builds Apple's iPhones? Not Apple, right?
Foxconn.
Foxconn, yeah. So it's like TSMC builds NVIDIA's chips. Intel builds Intel's chips. You know what I mean? Like that's the difference.
Yeah.
So having
Oh
one
yeah.
specialized like in one thing, hey, all we do is we take existing designs, we don't do the design, we take that as the input and we build the chip. We understand the machines, we understand the science, we understand the technology. You get the chip that you designed as our output. And then NVIDIA's job is we have a blank sheet of paper and our job is to come up with the best design that can actually be built, right? With Intel, it's like twice as hard because it's like Intel has to design chips to Intel's foundry, not the best foundry, what Intel currently
Mm.
has, right? So it's like you get all the complications in that cross chatter because like is Intel's foundry as good as TSMC's? What features can they build versus what they can't? Should they be designing this chip but passing this to TSMC? But then that looks really bad to shareholders because they should be building their chips. It's kind of like you've sort of forced yourself into this corner because you say you can do everything. But if you can't do everything the best in the world,
Mhm.
why are you doing it? So in my opinion, especially when things are moving this fast, right? Like you got to remember when Intel was king, computing felt like it was moving fast, but I mean, the pace of AI, it's like if I was talking to you about something that happened 6 months ago, so still in 2025 about AI, you'd be like, dude, it's forever ago. Why are you bringing
I know.
ChatGPT 4.5? Why are you talking about this, right? Like 5 has been out for minutes. Why are we talking about 4,
Right.
right? So it's like that speed I think is too fast to design and build and design and build. And so like what's Nvidia doing? They're designing, throwing it over the fence to TSMC and immediately starting the next design, right? Like we're shipping Blackwell Ultra, they're already designing Rubin and Feynman and whatever, right? Like they're already announcing chips 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. There's no way Intel can do that and be held to those promises because they have to develop them and build them too, right?
Yeah,
Again, in my opinion.
Yeah, TSMC is such a fascinating company for so many different reasons. It's like the world's number one company for building these chips. Taiwan is like producing what, like 90% of the advanced AI chips, etc.
Yeah.
Um, these trillion-dollar companies can't copy what they do because of the technology, the culture. And also, I mean, there's this idea that they call it the Silicon Shield because it
Yep.
basically because of the geopolitical stuff, it protects them from China because US is like, well, we have a special interest in this little island, so we got to it's so weird. It's such a linchpin of the world's technology in that tiny, tiny little place. Absolutely. Yeah, it's just a very interesting thing to think about. So you're not seeing that changing anytime soon, and you're not seeing GPUs losing their place in the world anytime soon.
Yeah, so I think like one thing. Let me clarify one thing, and I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts too. Don't let me steal like the whole discussion, right? I think the market is growing a lot faster than companies can fill it, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So GPUs are a physical item. You know what I mean? Which means Nvidia can only get so many of them produced each year. You know, but the AI market is growing much faster than the amount of chips that are being produced to power all of that demand, right? All of the prompts, all of the apps, all of the ecosystem that's growing by like I think it's like 40% a year every year, right? It's like insane. Um, so of course other chip companies, AMD, Broadcom, Qualcomm, even Apple, right, are going to come in and fill that vacuum. There's infinite demand currently and not infinite supply. So there's there's no worries about if you're building a chip, somebody's going to consume it, right? They'll put it in a data center, they'll put it in a phone, they'll do whatever they can to get more AI into people's hands. So I think there's room for ASICs, GPUs, XPUs, even CPUs for certain specific workloads to coexist. I don't think this is one of those like one architecture takes all type situations, because as fast as you can eat the pie is growing much faster. You know, it's an infinite pie. You could eat forever and not consume the pie.
Yeah. And yeah, before the interview, we talked about this is going to be more like the informal discussion. We're going to chat. It's a podcast, and it turns into us grilling you with questions like, all right, to answer.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're just fascinated with the stuff. And like, we just want to understand more about kind of like the hardware side of it.
What are you most passionate about? Like, tell me a little bit about like, you know, I'm a hardware guy. What are you guys like excited about AI? What?
I mean, it definitely, for me, it's more the models, more the actual AI models. I mean, all of that is powered by the hardware. A lot of the progress depends on the hardware. And right now, I'm very excited, for example, to see what happens with Grok 4.2 when it gets
Yeah.
released. It's already being tested. So, and it seems to be very good, definitely at least GPT-5 level or better. And you know, with Elon, he tends to kind of find that like the Pareto principles, like what is the like one tiny what's that sort of domino that I can push where just everything
Yeah.
falls over. And in this game, because he wasn't in the race for AI models not that long ago, and then he comes out, he gets a few AI researchers and just some ungodly amount of GPUs, right? His Colossus centers, and then starts cranking out these models, and he seems to be a little bit ahead of the curve, at least as far as I can tell, because a lot of the studies that I've been looking at in terms of like the next big level of AI and where that progress is going to come from is scaling up reinforcement learning. And in
Yeah.
fact, OpenAI, they were at the Sequoia Summit, the venture capital firm, and one of the OpenAI employees, researchers, I blanking on the name, unfortunately. So he's saying, like, in the beginning, we spent all the compute, all the hardware resources and training time on pre-training. And then with O1, the first reasoning model, we added just a little bit of reinforcement learning. And then he's saying as that continues, that reinforcement learning is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm almost seeing it as the convergence of like we create, because before we had Google DeepMind, AlphaGo, Alpha Zero, right? So
Yeah.
there's that kind of branching of AI technology. And then we have LLMs that are more general, and now they're merging. Now we're throwing them in these almost simulations. We're like, all right, do these problems, 50 billion times until you get better at them. And Elon did that with Grok 4, because he took Grok 3, which is at the time wasn't the best sort of base model. He threw tons of reinforcement learning compute at it. And all of a sudden, we're seeing some very, very interesting results and abilities and stuff like that. So, and what's interesting about that is also that Dr. Jim Fan of Nvidia, he's saying almost the exact same thing about how robotics is going to get trained. He's like, we're going to throw them in simulation, and maybe you can help me with the name that he used for. Did he call it like the universal agent or the world agent? Do you remember his terminology?
So like I know Isaac Jim runs in something called the Omniverse. Is that what you're talking about?
So that was part of his presentation. He had this one terminology. The idea was, and I forget, it's something like world agent or the one agent to rule them all, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
Like it was some terminology. I don't think it's an official product name. I think he just uses it for his kind of presentation. But the idea was that you create an AI model that goes and plays, let's say, like video games, right? So it plays this game and that game, and then it goes through what you can think of as different worlds that are 3D digital worlds. And then if you think about it, it keeps generalizing its knowledge across these different worlds. And then the 10,000th and first world is our reality, right?
Yeah.
It's sort of like our world. So and for that agent, it's just going to be, oh, it's another Tuesday. It's just another video game I'm playing. Let's go.
Right.
And that model, once it's trained in these simulations and Isaac Jim and Omni World, like whatever they're using to train it, it's going to be able to power everything. And as Dr. Jim Fan puts it, he's like, everything that moves will be autonomous, right? So your lawnmower, the jets in the sky, the just cars, like anything,
That's
you'll
crazy.
have that one agent that has learned from 1,000 or 10,000 different worlds, video games, whatever, and then all of its combined knowledge is going into the thing, and it can look like a car, an octopus, or a bipedal robot, or whatever. Um, yeah. So I don't know,
Pass.
that
You
idea
see,
just kind of blows my mind.
do you see that?
That's
Do you ever
awesome.
see that Rick and Morty where it's like that thing comes to life to pass butter, and he's like, "Why do I
Ye-
exist?" And he's like, "To
Yeah.
pass butter." He's like, "This is it. You know, this is all I
Yeah.
do." Yeah, that's what I feel like. So, yeah, the thing that's kind of interesting me right now is sort of the layered approach to AI. I don't love right now that everything happens in these gigantic servers and that I always have to send my data off. I see a world that I'm hoping for, and it seems like Apple's trying their best to get this to me, but I don't know if they'll succeed. Where I have something like an iPhone or a laptop, or it could be a smart refrigerator, or even a humanoid that walks around my house, and it's captured a lot of data about me and my life, and it's trained to help me and to scale me and read things that I could never read and help me understand things. But it's not like I've given away my information every single time, and it's always going into some giant training thing. So, you know, when it comes to say like voting or making decisions with governments, I don't like the idea of just like one vote, one person for a representative. I wish I had an AI that could help me actually understand what matters to me and then talk to me and then help like coordinate with my neighbors on a smaller scale and help coordinate in the community on a smaller scale and solve a community problem without having to just like vote for senators who are just so disconnected from like my daily life. You know what I mean? And I'm wondering
Yeah.
if AI emerges at these local scales and can actually make my life a lot better and help preserve privacy on different scales. And I'm kind of looking to who can build that or how that might be possible, or if anyone's even interested in preserving as a citizen, like us as a whole, not just maximizing profit. So
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's a really cool idea. That's like a really interesting concept. I go to a lot of trade shows. I haven't seen obviously exactly what you're talking about, which I think is actually a great idea, and a lot of people would buy into that. But I've seen like a near equivalent. So there are going to be AIs, for example, that replace mall directories and can help you get around like a local area, right? Like that shop's over there. This is where you get this food. If you need restrooms, oh, you have kids. This is where all the kid friendly stuff is, blah, 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 blah. So it's not a community in the sense of your local neighborhood, but it is a community of stores, of attractions, of things to go do, buy, eat, right, so on and so forth, and a lot of local people going there, and an AI that is kind of like dedicated to guiding people through an area, right? So you can imagine if they can solve that problem, they can also solve like a sort of local culture problem. Like, hey, my town really cares about this, and this is the kind of stuff that people and my neighbors like convene around, and these are the shared values we have, and blah blah blah. And like have an AI sort of dedicated to that, even if it's something as simple as like, hey, I know who everyone is, and I can help coordinate meetings and take notes and remind you of events that are coming up in your neighborhood and connect you to neighbors if you don't know who they are. And like I can serve as your local directory and your guide, and you know what I mean, like all those AI agentic things that they're doing in the mall can start applying to your neighborhood. So I think there is a
yeah.
future where what you're talking about, not an individual AI agent, but not like just something that treats you as a number either, but it's like an agent for you and maybe your block or your neighborhood. I think that's totally a reasonable and cool idea.
Yeah, like imagine like an HOA that you pay and it's maybe one
Yeah.
of the houses on your block and it's actually just a server, but it's allowed to have much more fine-grained detail about you because it's not like going to train Optimus or Facebook's sales algorithm. So
Yeah.
and you pay a fee for it. I like a world where you pay for these things because I don't want the ad model to be in between me. That just brings in corruption, I think. So I want to pay for something so that its best interest is to serve me properly, and then have a bunch of people who I care about collaborate around it and just let it be in a separate system. But I don't know. I mean, maybe Nvidia will help us do that too, and just neighborhoods buy their own servers and infrastructure kind of starts to diffuse out a little bit from these mega centers.
Yeah. I think that's a really cool idea. And you can even imagine, I forget what it's called, sorry, but I know Tesla had this like product for a while that was like about efficiently routing and storing electricity, right? So, monitoring the grid, buying electricity when it's cheap, distributing it, selling it back to the grid when it's more expensive. I'm just blanking on the name of the software, but you
Is it
can
the new?
imagine.
Oh, is
Oh,
that
go
the
ahead. Sorry.
hardware thing they just released, or are you talking about a different thing in Star Wars? Because
It's
they just.
something like I looked at it like years ago, so it's been
Oh, okay,
around
okay.
for a while, but I can't I can't remember what it's called. I don't know if it's ever got into production, but it was like basically a software suite that like helped households and communities manage power. Managing meaning storing, buying, selling, and distributing, right? Um, I think that's going to exist for tokens. I think for sure there will be something that like helps route power and tokens to hospitals when they're overrun, or when there's a big event or a big storm. It's like all the emergency services get all the information first. Whatever it needs to happen so that like distributed intelligence, we all have it when we need it. But when there's an emergency or an event, or there's a change in the cost structure or whatever it is, it's like intelligence gets routed to where it needs to go to best serve the community overall, right? So I live in Tampa, Florida. We got hit by some pretty bad hurricanes last year. I would have loved a world where if I wasn't getting cell service, it was because I knew all the people clearing brush, all the people sweeping up debris, all the people trying to get the internet back were getting my cell service to better do their jobs to help me get
Yeah.
my utilities back. You know what I mean? I think the same is true when it comes to intelligence, right? Like, give my tokens to whoever needs it to get ChatGPT to answer their questions to help me, right?
Yeah,
So
mass scale coordination, swarm problems.
Yeah.
Yeah, all solvable with AI. But yeah, go
we
ahead, Wes.
we talked to Ed Sachi yesterday. I'm not sure the people that are watching which interview is going to air first, but so he's doing the simulation. Fable Studios. Amazon just invested. He was with working with Oculus. I mean, he's like at the heart of everything over there in the Bay Area. Absolutely fascinating conversation, and he really I even haven't had a chance to unpack this, but he said something interesting because so the simulation, for people that don't know, if you saw that AI generated South Park thing, or recently those little cartoons where it's like animated Elon and Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman just cussing at each other or whatever. So he creates this sort of the ability for anyone to create their own cartoons or shows or whatever based on any given universe. Everything runs. So like how they develop the South Park episode is the entire town is simulated. So every character in the town is walking around, and when they come to, so it's like a huge video game, like a living city. And then the AI director kind of zooms in and creates clips of these interactions, and that turns into a whole story. Um, but he was saying that, the one thing that a lot of people miss about, and this is tying back to Dylan's point. Sorry if I'm going a little bit roundabout point, but um, so my first thing, he was saying that in the future, everybody's going to be able to produce whatever kind of shows that they want. And then when movies and franchises release their franchises, people might be able to take that and create their own fan fiction or their own versions of it or their own episodes of it. And I realized that, like, for most of the interview, I had a vision that was very different from his, because I'm like, yeah, everybody's gonna just ruin stuff. Because imagine taking your favorite character, right? Somebody that you like, you love, that you watched since you were a kid or whatever, and then somebody takes it and just ruins it, and
Yeah.
it turns it into something you're just like, ugh, like you hate that because it destroys the value of that character just because anybody can type in, okay, you say this silly thing. Dylan brought
Yeah,
up the
right.
idea of, like Lower Decks, which was a spinoff of Star Trek, which Star Trek is very beloved, but there was a lot of, I guess, resistance to the show Lower Decks because it was a little bit more, what's the word, the people like irreverent or whatever, like it didn't really follow the same universe. Um, but what Ed Sachi was saying is like, no, these models will be built in such a way that they're going to enforce that canonical kind of universe idea, right? So it's like, no, you can't have Picard go on a killing spree, because the
Right.
model will be like, nope, that's not how this universe works. That's not how this character works. And that really changed my mind, because a lot of the stuff, like in the crypto space, a lot of the ideas of trying to preserve certain things and how it'd be like not being able to be changed easily. An AI model that enforces that would kind of solve some of those issues. Dylan, what you're saying about having a community thing that's not run by the government or Nvidia or Google or whatever, but it's like, no, these are the principles of our community. So no,
Yeah.
we're not gonna, if some was it the homeowners association, some person gets elected, some corrupt person gets elected, and tries to change everything, the A model will enforce it. Like, no, like I will move a little bit, but no, you can't just change everything. These are the principles. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I mean, if
Well,
that's, yeah, what do you think about that? Let me just throw that out there.
okay, so I do want to hear Alex's thing, but just, yeah, I have to throw in one thought there. So there are these things that sometimes happen that are systematic and they're not individuals' problems, but they affect individuals. For example, as a housing example, there's this huge company called BlackRock, and they are known for buying gigantic chunks of houses, and they can own like block after block after block. They can sell the houses to themselves in weird ways to like get the values at certain prices, and they can price out the reality. Like the free market mechanism is not stepping in to make that house the price that it should be. Some giant conglomerate has bought them, and no individual can fight back because you can't see it. Like one person doesn't have any power in that system. So the only solution would be something like a bunch of people having some sort of access to something smarter to them. They could then say like, oh, we can't, like, none of us will buy at that price, or like we can see this systematic problem holding us back and we're going to avoid it or build in another area or something. I don't know. It allows the hidden costs to sort of be exposed and
Yep.
to fight back against them.
Yeah, I almost see it as, yeah, exactly what you're saying. So basically, we as humans, in order to have bigger power or influence than individuals, like we come into groups, right? We build our little organizations and communities and whatever. But the problem is that somebody needs to run it, some committee or one person, whatever that sort of rule is. And being on top is its own form of, I don't know, currency or money, or like it's a valuable resource. As if you're a CEO of a company or whatever, you're running, you have a lot of sway. People enjoy that influence, that power, whatever. So there's a little bit of that corruptive element. What if at the very top there was a model that enforced certain principles, maybe not didn't make all the decisions, but at least didn't allow individual bad actors to completely sway it one
Yeah.
way or another? It's like, no, I got to keep it within a certain boundaries. Like somebody wants to sell all these, instead of building a home for old people or whatever, or low income housing, oh, let's just sell that land to BlackRock. And the company goes, well, no, like if there's a viable way to build low income housing, we're going to do it. If we can't, then maybe we'll consider selling it to the highest bidder and maybe taking that money else. But you know what I mean? It's never going to like just corrupt everything and let it be stripped. I feel like that's a possibility.
Yeah, like what's best for Tampa as a whole might not be what BlackRock wants, but it is what the citizens of Tampa want. So they could say, oh, we don't sell any property to BlackRock. And they're like, but that's immediate money and they'll pay more than anyone else right now. And they're like, but in the long run, the AI can see what this is going to do to the average person. So we're going to put this long-term, like long-term thinking. I know it's not great at long-term thinking yet, but I'd like to imagine that maybe an AI in the future could have that sort of foresight that's beyond humans and coordinating beyond humans.
I have an interesting question for you, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If I want to move to California and I put a bid on a house, all the money, right? Whatever. And I get told, hey, we're really sorry. You can't buy this house because the neighborhood's AI says you can't buy it. How would you react to that?
No Florida man allowed. We've seen the headlines about Florida man.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just trying to think through this, like the boots on the ground situation, right? Like, okay, these AIs exist, right? A new person, or okay, I'm part of some corporation or I work there. Like maybe I'm just a BlackRock employee, whatever, right? And I want to come in and I genuinely just want to buy this house. And then an AI, the reason I can't buy this property or this car or this asset or whatever is because some AI somewhere did the math and told me I couldn't.
Yeah. Well, so the big answer is that these machines need to be less like black boxes. And to do that, you have to look at what Anthropic's doing and you have to build them extremely sparse. And they have to be done extremely sparse with autoencoders to give individual features explanations. And it's not cost effective, but it does give you actual explainability for why something happened. And yeah, there should be kind of like the simulation that Wes was talking about, a system that says you can't live here. You have to say why. And if it says, well, because you're BlackRock, and what happens when you do this is it prices out people in the long run, you can't come in. But if it says you can't come in because you're Asian, we're going to say, well, that's not part of the rules that we encoded. Like that's not what the HOA wanted. It's not to be, or they could be held accountable in other ways for something that seems. But yeah, there's no great explanation for that except AI research needs to get much better at explaining why decisions are made, and then also articulating those, and then making sure those parameters are as public as possible. But um,
I
you
would be
know,
curious to see if we ever allow an AI to take the top spot in any hierarchy. Like, I can't imagine a world where our president is an AI, for example. I can't imagine a world where the coach of a great baseball team is an AI. Like there are certain things that I think humanity may not or should not or hopefully will not ever let AI do. And I think being at the top of a hierarchy where they can enforce rules might be one of them. I'm a little hard to
yeah, I get
convince
that.
that, like, an
Yeah,
AI stopping me from taking action as a person.
yeah, I agree with you,
Yeah.
and hopefully that's not like the kind of thinking that I was trying to portray. What I'm more frustrated is like say 1,000 of us can all go to the same DMV, and all of us can go to the DMV and have a bad experience, and then if you ask someone like why the DMV sucks, they're like, well, I voted for Biden, and like that didn't affect our DMV. Like your
Sure.
like Trump or Biden choice never rippled down on any significant level to all the things that seem to matter to so many of us. And it just seems like AI can maybe coordinate in between better.
So I definitely agree with that. Like going back to the mall example and the directory or the
Yeah.
town-based example, like having AI agents that are just there as like helpers or even do jobs that are like people don't want or cannot do just because like taking a crowded mall as an example. You can have like a help station, but they can still only serve one person at a time. You can imagine if it's a complex like multi-story mall like the Mall of America, you're just inundated with people with constant questions like, where's this? Where's that? I want this. I'm looking for that. Where's my kid? Where's the bathroom? Right? Like all this kind of stuff. And AI is like, oh, I can spin up 10,000 agents to help 10,000 people at once. If I have to, I can be right on your phone. Just download the app and I can help you. I'm your personal digital assistant through this mall. You don't even need to stop at a kiosk. I'm just going to guide you to like what you say your destination is. Right. So I can imagine a world where that happens a little more than like an enforcer.
Yeah.
Right. Does that
So
make sense?
yeah, they'll probably always be a symbolic president, but it does seem to me like I could imagine almost like fiduciary duty. I mean, Sam Altman's talked about how he can't wait to replace himself as CEO with something that is better than him, and
Yeah.
it would be his job to make as much profit as possible to do that. And I suppose at some point, a government lead. I mean, human in the loop is sort of always a good idea, but yeah, I mean, it wouldn't
I
surprise me
do think
if
that. I do believe
yeah,
human in the loop is always gonna be a good idea. I
Y-
I think so. Like,
Yeah.
maybe that's wrong, and maybe it's, like, that ends up being the weakness and the bottleneck in every system, but, like, something fundamentally, turns me off about the idea of letting a generative model govern, like, rules about society, human society, right? Like, I can't really
yeah,
put
I know.
eloquent words to it, but something about that
No,
really,
you're
like,
right. Well,
ooh,
and
you know what I mean?
then humanity's gone. I mean, you can imagine a doctor gets an AI that says, "Hey, this person has cancer," but you wouldn't want the robot to just start removing the cancer. You'd be like, "Can a doctor
Yeah.
check just to make sure that that AI like does look like it found something, and now we can hone in the human just to just be in the loop before you do the surgery?"
Yeah, or even research, right? Like one of the things I go to a lot of like Nvidia talks and like conferences and whatever, right? And one of the things that I've learned is like generative AI, like we all naively, I think, or natively, I should say, think about generative AI as like Chat GPT, right? Like I input some text, maybe an image, maybe even a video, and I'm like getting some combination of that as an output. But like people are using generative AI to discover new drugs and new kinds of materials, and like there's lots of human in the loop there, but the AI is doing like really hard research, really hard like math combinations to try different things that you wouldn't be able to do in a real lab. There's like all these other fluid dynamics and climate simulation, like calculations that were like, how do we even set up that experiment? And it's like, oh, I can just run the code to do it. I understand enough about like the physics, the chemistry, the science to like try it. Obviously needs some like human intervention to like, oh, get it right. But like the number of new materials, the number of product prototypes, the number of patent filings has actually skyrocketed since generative AI has come out. So like the point I'm trying to make is when we think about AIs, we're stuck in this like policy, text-based, show me a direction, give me written instructions. Like your output is fundamentally text, video, image. And what I'm trying to bring to the table right now is the output can be chemical compounds, it can be fluid simulations, it can be like all these other things that can help us in all sorts of other different ways without replacing us or ordering us around or telling us what the best solution is. It can be more like that cancer diagnostics where it's like, hey, I've seen 10 gajillion images of x-rays with and without cancer patients. I'm 99.9% certain I'm looking at cancer in this spot of this image. What you do with that information as the human doctor now is up to you, right?
Yeah. What a little bit change the subject, but like, do you believe free market capitalism is working? Like, do you think the invisible hand is guiding these FANG stocks correctly, or do you feel like that's lost? And if so, is AI gonna figure it out even further? And stock market investing isn't anything besides meme trading.
Yeah, so like at a philosophical level, so I'm really biased and I don't know that I can ever like shake this bias. I'd like to believe that in the short term, you might be right, right? It's like a popularity contest and Oracle's up 50% today. And, when OpenAI goes public, it'll be worth $16 trillion or whatever, right? In the short term. Um, but over the long term, I do believe that the stock market does find something like the right intrinsic value for every asset on the market. Like I do believe directionally, AMD should be worth more than Intel today, where 20 years ago that wasn't true. And sure enough, their market caps reflect that today, right? I do believe that Nvidia should be, if not the largest, one of the largest companies in the world because of the value they provide, the infrastructure they're providing, all that kind of stuff, right? Is it supposed to be exactly $4.6 trillion or whatever they're worth? I have no idea. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know exactly how many chips they sold and for how much and to who, and if those people got their money back on it, like return on their invested capital. So it's like, will we ever know if it truly works? I think it's more of like a smart voting machine, in the kind of like poly market, right? Like in the long term, where like society says it's worth this, therefore it is.
Speaking of poly markets, so I believe it's coming to the United States, right? They're allowing it's going to be legal. It's going to be here.
Yeah.
Recently, there was this very interesting LLM benchmark. By the way, so LLMs, so the benchmarks that we used to have, which are like multiple choice questions, they kind of got saturated. And most people are just dismissing them. I mean, it's kind of a good starting point, but people are like, whatever. It's not as important. And there's all these new benchmarks popping up that are incredibly fascinating because they actually test these models' ability to do real world tasks. So it's not just a multiple choice question. It's like, can you do this thing? One of the recent ones was profit bench, profit like prophetic, predicting the future, profit bench, but it's also a play on words because I think it's like profit bench, where they're testing the different models' ability to predict future events on poly markets and other marketplaces of I forget all the different names, but like, so basically they'll say, okay, who's going to win the Super Bowl? Who's going to get elected for New Jersey's governor? Who's going to be the number one songwriter? And there's like a million different ones, and people bet, and depending on which way people bet, the odds shift. So if you bet correctly, and the market bets against you, can win a lot of money,
Yeah.
or you can win a little bit of money if you are betting towards the more favorable outcome. And they're testing all the different large language models to see how good they are predicting these things. And obviously it has to be a real-time benchmark because you don't want it to be trained on past data so it can predict it based on past data. It has to be real time, right?
Yeah.
So it has to make a prediction, then the event happens, then we add it to the benchmark. Absolutely phenomenal. Whoever came up with that was a genius, because I think also they could get acquired for tons of, because that's very valuable data to investment companies and funds and stuff like that. But we're seeing GPT-5 on top. We're seeing Grok. I mean, all the frontier models, they're doing pretty well. I think GPT-5 was the number one. But basically what you're seeing is like, here's the market. And so sort of like the human aggregate prediction machine, like you're saying, like the voting machine, and the abilities of these models, they're going like this, like this, like this, and they're getting very close to the global human sort of intelligence, how well we pick these things. And when I did that video, I asked, okay, what happens if it supersedes that? What happens if it gets better, if it has superhuman abilities at picking these things, right? So all of us bet on one team to win the Super Bowl, but these models are just slightly more, they're 10% more accurate overall at predicting these things. So What do you think about that? Does that break the markets, or is it just no big deal? Or is that not
Yeah.
even possible that it's going to get better? It's just going to match the total human consciousness, whatever, and then just stay there.
So that's an interesting question, right? I wonder if it's doing that because it's getting access to like the collective human knowledge, what people are saying about that event before it happens in real time, or if it's using some reasoning and some deduction and some other expert tools that it might have access to do like further things that maybe the average human can't. My guess is it'll never supersede an expert human in that field, right? So it's like people who are really good sports bettors or really good poker players or whatever. I'm not sure an AI will ever do much better than them, but people have said that about chess, and like I think for a long time the best chess player has been an AI, right? It's like they're not allowed in like tournaments and stuff like that because like the best human players cannot beat the best chess AIs, I think. Um my worry, so I think that's all good and fine when it comes to like sports betting, investing. Maybe investing is like where already starting to cross the line because if you're moving markets, you're affecting other people. But like this whole conversation sort of makes me feel like I'm the prelude to Minority Report, if you've ever seen that movie.
Yeah, for
Mhm.
sure.
So it's like, the AI is incredibly good, not perfect, but incredibly good at predicting what people are going to do before they do it. And in this case, it's like, well, I predict that you're going to commit a crime, so we're going to arrest you before you commit the crime
Mhm.
because the oracles in that case predicted that you would commit this crime, right? If it's murder, you're getting charged with murder, even though you didn't do it yet, right? The asterisk is yet. You know what I mean? Um, if a AI is
Yeah.
90% good at predicting, is that
Mhm.
good enough? 99%,
Mhm.
99 point not like at what point do you say, "Hey man, like you can't guarantee that I would have done the thing. I'm getting arrested for something that I didn't do and I
Mhm.
swear I would never do." Right? Like so I wonder where that line could be invested,
Yeah, I know. That's well, like
cuz
that's like human in the loop too on the
yeah.
decision for cancer, but human in the loop for policing, it's a little bit of a side thing, is pretty fascinating because if it's like, hey, I think this guy's going to go here, like steal something from this house, he's been casing it out, I think they're going to break in, then yeah, the police should be like, well, why don't we just set up a camera that nobody can see to watch that front door, and we think it's going to happen tomorrow night, and just be there. And
Yeah.
then if they see the door break down, just swarm as quickly as possible. But yeah, that's crazy to think about. I don't
I
Yeah.
know.
talked to a professor
Pre-crime.
and lawyer, Krista Laser, about some of these issues, and it goes so deep. It was like I don't even know what's right or wrong, because she was
Yeah.
saying also there's a lot of people that get falsely accused. So it'd be great to have access to AI recordings, stuff that might be private. But if somebody says, "Oh, this person, beat me up or whatever, or did something horrible to me," that we could clear that person if we had access to all this data.
You know what else stuck with me, Ed, from Wes, from the interview we just did with Ed. He said, imagine a world where this AI is making decisions for you. You're sort of
Yes.
offloading, like, what should I do with my day? What should I
Yes.
eat for lunch? Who should I hang out with? And it's benevolent and it's always giving you these answers, but there's just that creepy feeling that you're like this thing knows everything about you and it's making your life as good as possible, but you're just not the person deciding anymore. Like it's great, but who is it? Like you're just this tool,
And then
getting
there's just
pushed
like
around.
there's a little bit of this meta layer, right? So it's like some people, it's a trade-off of privacy for X, right? For convenience, for security, for personalization, right? Like when you give your data to Facebook, what are they doing with it? They're serving ads you're more likely to click, which should be a net good thing, right? It's like, I'm a dude, maybe don't show me diaper ads, you know what I mean? So it's like, in that case, trading my data might be good because what I'm getting as an output is better. But you run into this weird situation where it's like the people who opt into the system and their life starts getting optimized by AI versus the people who opt out and are leading,
Yeah.
suboptimal lives, right? Whether you mean mathematically or whatever, right? Like people who shun smartphones, for example. It's like, how do you even get a hold of this guy? He doesn't have a phone. You know what I mean? He doesn't have email. You have to go like write him a letter or send him a carrier pigeon to like get a hold of him. You know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, do you think that whether or not you choose to, should we have a society where we have the haves and have-nots, the AIs and the AI nots? Like what kind of divide? I'll give you another example. My mother is a little older. She's like in her 80s, so she had me pretty late in life. She does not know how to use computers and the internet. It's just like beyond her, right? So we have like a very big divide between us because I have access to the world's information. I'm informed. I know a lot about a lot of things purely because like just because this is in my pocket. I'm not a smart dude. I just have access to it all the time, right? And she doesn't. And that's a very fundamentally different life experience. Do you guys think that AI will have that same level of divide like the people who choose to use AI, have AI agents, deep personalized AI experiences, and those who don't?
Well, you're stuck with a human brain, just like us. Like right now, it's great being the apex predator of the planet and being smart and living in a first world country. And, we've been blessed with a lot of stuff. But like when ASI looks at a human brain and is like, it's like cockroach stuff. Like I can predict it. It's not complicated. It'll just be a weird feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So like,
I mean, it'll be fundamentally just different. Yeah. Like, I mean,
yeah,
your mom with the phone versus you, like you with the phone versus your mom, and then us versus ASI is just so different.
yeah, there's so many things that we could go down here because first of all, yeah, I had an elderly relative that towards the end of his life had trouble. Well, so maybe this is a different situation from what you're describing, but my situation was he had trouble navigating certain situations, maybe forgetting like leaving the stove on and stuff like that. It was
sure.
like, and back then there was nothing that could help. Nowadays we're seeing more and more tools that could potentially maybe kind of monitor the situation. And at that point, it's like, oh, I would have, loved to have something like that, just maybe like a little pin or whatever they're doing now. They have some little thing that like almost seems almost like telepathy now that I don't know. It just a new startup, so it could be complete nonsense. But um, so my prediction is for regular humans, everyday people, the people that use AI will just steamroll the people that don't, and we're already beginning to see that happen. Um, but I think even more importantly, we are really seeing where this AI absolutely shines at a superhuman level. And so recently there was a coding competition in Japan at Coder, I think it was called 2025 World Champion. And the winner was somebody whose name was Sai-Ho. And he worked at OpenAI. I guess he was on the Dota reinforcement learning, the Dota 5 team that won the human, beat the humans. And was it Dota or one of the MOBA games, Dota
Yeah,
or
right.
whatever it was? Yeah. Um, and the second person that came in on the competition was some secret model from OpenAI, their internal model that hasn't been seen before. And it was winning for 9 out of the 10 hours of the competition, like beating every single human at these very difficult coding optimization tasks. And at the very, very end, Sai-Ho basically beat it. And so we've actually had a few back and forths on Twitter, and he wrote out what he thinks is he's basically saying where AI, these LLM models will absolutely dominate is areas where there's like a vast search space of solutions and a very specific right or wrong path. So if you think about like if you're designing a car that goes a little bit further on 1 gallon of gas, if you can just, we know that's good, all else being
Right.
equal. And there's a billion different ways that we haven't thought of how to design a car. So that's where AI is going to kill it. We've seen with Alpha Evolve, it designs better chips than human engineers, or at least it does it autonomously. It's
Sure.
improved its own training policy. So Gemini model with Alpha Evolve improved the training of Gemini. Google remade their entire data center, the system that runs it, based on how AI optimized it. Right, that saved them millions of dollars. So
That's cool.
those things is gonna dominate. Isomorphic Labs, you've mentioned drug discovery, so that's part of Google DeepMind. That's exactly what they're doing. AlphaFold, that's exactly more or less what it's doing. So we know that's the area we're just gonna kill it. It's gonna optimize every single thing. You mentioned material discovery, right? Google DeepMind Gnome, right? It says here's a billion materials that I think might work, and then a robot goes and it tries to replicate them, and then it goes, okay, this one worked, this one's real. So we're already seeing that rolling out. So where that's going to happen is companies that utilize that will file a billion patents, or maybe just not file patents, but just produce those products. And every little thing that we have, there's probably some way to optimize it. So you might have a steering wheel in the future that looks like this weird triangular shape, and nobody knows why, but it seems to reduce fatalities, right? And that gets applied across everything we interact
Yeah.
with. You know what I mean? So that's just my 2 cents.
So Alex, what's your thoughts on an intelligence tax? I mean, you have two positions to kind of argue from. Like, one, you might be a Nvidia investor and you wouldn't want intelligence taxed because, you know, that's hurting your stock price. But also as a person, you might see some level of wealth inequality or some level of displacement and maybe want sort of a tax or a basic income or something kind of put into place. But what's your thoughts on an intelligence tax? Should it be something we're thinking about for these FANG companies as they get into the tens of trillions and start dominating other sectors in ways that is based off the intelligence they created, not necessarily the invention of the people who own the company?
Yeah. It's so that's an interesting question. I can't think of anything else that works like that, right? So we get taxed on income. You get money in exchange for value or service or whatever, and part of that money goes back to the government in the form of taxes. I think if there's an intelligence tax, that would imply we're either paying intelligence or we're somehow paying for intelligence, like in a way that can be taxed, right? So is an intelligence tax like, hey, I'm paying yeah, go ahead.
So the point would be if intelligence that was invented by a company is out there doing work on its own, like a human and somebody who is intelligent is doing, and the wealth becomes so extreme that there should be sort of a sharing of that top line.
So why would that? So like in my opinion, you should just tax the company, right? It's like they're making revenue. Companies should pay taxes. They already do, regardless of how they make that money. And we can maybe there's a tax on how you make that money. So for example, gambling, when winnings from gambling are taxed differently than ordinary income, are taxed differently than capital gains and dividends and all that, right? Like there are different taxes for different ways you can make money. You lose more than half your money when you win the lottery, for example, right? Um,
Yeah, so I guess something like that. So yeah,
yeah. So like,
if a company is just deploying AI to go solve real estate problems, financial problems, engineering problems, and they just maybe taxed at a much higher, like a much higher rate because those are like decimating other industries and job
yeah.
displacement. And yeah, so FANG stocks may be taxed differently, and it could be as small as what parts of the company. Like if Meta's building glasses, it's taxed normal, but if Meta's putting a server of intelligence up and it's disrupting the world in significant ways, then maybe taxed more. You'd be okay with that?
I so I don't know. I think that's a really interesting like economic and philosophical argument. My gut would say I don't care how you're delivering value. I don't care how you're delivering value. However you're generating revenue, you should be taxed on the revenue. It shouldn't be, hey, I decided to let's do like a simpler example that we can all like kind of wrap our heads around, and then you can tell me if this applies or not, right? I run a McDonald's. I decide to replace every employee with automation. So I have a robotic fry cook, I have a robotic cashier, end to end. You interface with the tablet, you go around to a window, you get your food that you ordered. There's no humans except one supervisor who just makes sure the building doesn't burn down, right? Like, other than that, it's fully automated. I make revenue, same exact revenue I would if I had humans working there. So the money hasn't changed, like the menu prices haven't changed, but now I'm paying. And let's just say the costs of running that McDonald's were the exact same, right? Instead of paying health insurance and employee payroll and all these other things, I paid the same amount for robots. Should I be taxed differently?
So no, you shouldn't be in that situation. But because that's all contained within the McDonald's. Sort of what I'm getting at here more is this like broader society tax. So if AI has the foresight to say, because of McDonald's using low quality ingredients and a lot of preservatives, the healthcare system is taking on $500 billion extra in this burden. We'd like to dynamically let them put a rule in place and say, we have to tax you more if you're going to sell unhealthy food and, healthy food or something like that. Like,
So it'd be like carbon credits, but for like,
for everything.
yeah, for
Like
everything. Yeah.
AI can incentivize the whole world in just ways that is so far beyond what we can. But as a parent, like raising a child, you can see how incentives are constantly being adjusted with kids. Like, you do this, you eat your broccoli, you get the cookie, you like go to school, you get in trouble, you misbehave. AI could sort of do that for the long-term health of the world economy.
I think that goes back to like one of my earlier questions, right? Which is, would you be comfortable with an AI telling you how to behave because it's for some global optimum, right? It's not what's best for you, it's what's best for everyone, and that's why you have to do it. You know what I mean? You have to eat your broccoli not because I care about you being healthier, but because it lowers the total burden on the healthcare system. Oh, you can't drive right now because it's lowering the overall burden on we're optimizing traffic. You can't go until 35 minutes.
Yeah, like search pricing from Uber or something. Like,
yeah.
it
So it's like,
exists. Yeah.
would you be okay with that? The AI said, hey, you're locked out of your car for the next 30 minutes because we're trying to optimize global traffic. And if you get on the road right now, that's not
Yeah. I mean, clearly forcing you to eat broccoli or locking you out of your car crosses a lot of lines because that's not acceptable. But different taxes, different amounts of of like pay, because certain things are being passed on without your like you're basically socializing the costs and you're privatizing the benefits. It's just trying to even that out. Like, the companies are already making money selling a product, they throw the pollution into the ocean, and then the ocean has to deal with it. Like, they just get away with it.
I think that stuff I generally agree with you on. Like, if we're sharing the burden, whoever is sharing in the downside should also share in the upside. That I fundamentally agree with. And I think some of the systems we have in general try to do that. Like, hey, if you're giving too much carbon emissions, if you're causing too many, you have to pay this extra tax to buy carbon credits to offset the carbon that you're actually producing. You're incurring this extra cost because of like the quote unquote damage you're doing as a result of your operations, right? So you have two options. You can either fix your operations so you're not producing the carbon in the first place, or you can buy these credits, which is an extra cost to you to offset the emissions that you are producing, right? I hesitate to have an AI give economic incentives to people. Let's use the car example again. Instead of locking you out, it's like, hey, if you're on the road right now, you're getting charged triple for gas, or we're keeping a log and we'll send you a bill for the miles that you drive. So you can go, but you're economically disincentivized to go because of some traffic optimization thing, right? You okay with that? Like,
Yeah.
I'm genuinely asking.
No,
I'm
no.
not like, I don't mean that to be a leading question. I'm really asking.
To me, just to throw some context on there, I do think scale matters. I think the incentives for a company versus an individual are usually like vastly different. I don't like as much some of those things, but yes, I hurting your neighbor or like stealing and stuff, it does go all the way down to the individual. But I'm thinking more about the way companies are run and how, if there's such wealth inequality, there maybe for some people it's different, but if Elon becomes a trillionaire, okay, is that still capitalism? 10 trillion, is it still capitalism? Like, is this still incentivizing other entrepreneurs to go out there and build a company when most people are in so much debt and they're stuck at low levels and don't have access to build any kind of company through their innovation because they're not as smart as the AIs that Elon has, and they're also not as wealthy to create a company? It just sort of seems like it kind of breaks.
Yeah.
So
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I just want to jump in here because I do feel like talking about taxing revenue or taxing net profit or whatever, that just fundamentally might be a little bit flawed because number one, you have different incentive for the business versus the individual. So imagine a future where everything gets automated, more robots, more AIs, whatever, right? So what happens?
Yeah.
So the price of human labor drops. Like, you don't want to hire a human when you can hire an AI to do it cheaper, better, faster. But also the cost of everything, services, goods, everything drops as well. So before a family of four needed, let's say, 70,000 to survive in the United States, over time, as the price of everything dropped, that goes to 20,000 just to survive, have basic necessities. Again, those are assumptions, but we would have to see if that's how it plays out. Assuming that the companies don't jack up the prices as soon as they pass the savings down. Of course, I mean, there's tons of things that can go wrong, obviously. Like, what if at that point, every single company, every single corporation and small business in, let's say, the United States, this could be global as well, some portion of it just becomes like whenever you open a business, instead of getting taxed at 20% or whatever, 20% of the company belongs to something like the S&P 500, right? The stock fund of the top 500 biggest companies in the United States, but it's just every business belongs to that. And out of that, every single person that's born gets some dividend share that at that point might just pay for their basic survival, kind of like a UBI would. Because again, if we're believing this idea that automation will bring lower prices, that might drop the amount of money that is needed for a person to survive. So if 20% of each company goes to pay just a little bit, to each person, that seems like it might work. Again, there's assumptions there, but we would have to see how the whole thing works out. Obviously, the companies can't just capture that as profit for themselves, but it also aligns the country to the businesses, to the people, right? Because the better the country does, the better the businesses do, the better the businesses do, the better the people do. Everything's aligned. You might think twice about, writing something on the wall of your local Chick-fil-A or whatever, because you're like, well, they do pay me some portion
Yeah.
of their proceeds. Like, it aligns everything. And so to me, that seems like a much better approach. Because if we start thinking of it as UBIs, like, okay, we get $10,000 or we tax their net profit, well, there's tons of tax loopholes to reduce how much taxes you pay. What if the government prints $1 trillion or trillions of dollars? Then how much is 10,000 worth now? 2,000. So that's why playing with the currency, like, I feel like we should go to equity, ownership of these companies. Then what's good for them is good for us. That's just, you know what I mean, how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, also, I think we're about to see some of this happen in China. As far as I know, they've rolled out a digital currency that's kind of like a government crypto. And I think that's part of it, is they can incentivize different parts of the economy with different sort of taxations. And that's sort of where we're going to see if that's going to make them extremely efficient and more coordinated than the US, staying sort of independent on all these things or not. But go ahead, Alex.
So what I was going to say is, the Trump administration, or the government at large, I guess, owns 10% of Intel, right? I think one way to do that without overcomplicating it with AI and like all this other stuff, is I could see a world where the government owns 5% of every company. Let's just say 10% because that's how much they own of Intel, right? They put it in a sovereign wealth fund, and any American citizen can just buy into that fund, right? Or, like your retirement that gets matched buys into the fund, you buy into that. Some of your taxes go into you owning a piece of that fund. Whatever the mechanisms are for like getting American citizens invested in the American sovereign wealth fund would solve that problem. No AI, no carbon credits, no like simple solution is like, this is an American company. The American government has a slice purely so that it can distribute the ownership to its own citizens. It's not trying to control. It doesn't have board seats, doesn't have voting rights. Its job is to make sure that the citizens are bought in to the industries that America provides. Today it's software. If we onshore more manufacturing, it becomes more hardware, auto, right? Whatever it is, we want American citizens to be bought into the American economy. And now when you pay your taxes, you're still aligned, because guess what? Some of those taxes go to you being a shareholder of the American economy at large, right?
Yeah,
I think that
I love that idea. Yeah.
I would instantly buy into that fund. Like, I would shift all my investments into that, because like, that's cool. I'm like morally very aligned with that.
Yeah, I also like what that would do psychologically to me when I'm deciding what purchases to make. Because when I see a Tesla versus a BYD, and they're just pretty much the same, and I'm kind of on the fence, but I know one is contributing to the same system that's helping keep certain people off the street and put them in homes so that they have opportunities. It just feels better. It feels more American. It feels like something that would unify countries together.
Yeah. And I think so much of investing, so much of the AI research we all do, so much of like the hobbies that you're informed by and the economic decisions you make, they're actually based a lot on feeling. We can tell ourselves that like We're all very smart. We sit down, we do the numbers, we build a spreadsheet, we choose the optimal solution. But at the end of the day, it's like I have an iPhone because an iPhone makes me feel cool. Like people like Teslas because being in a Tesla makes them feel cool. It's like there's nothing wrong with that. You're making a purchase to reflect who you feel you are as a person. And if you're proud to be an American, and not every American is, and that's okay, but like investing in a sovereign wealth fund, even if it's not the most profit optimal solution, it's like I like the idea of spending money to support my country. I already pay taxes to do that. Why not participate in some of the returns of the American industry, which by the way have been exceptional over the last 10 years, right? So it's like why do our retirement funds and why does Social Security and Medicare and all that, why are all these things invested in bonds when they could have been invested in Google, Microsoft, Amazon, American companies? You know what I mean? These are companies that are built here to provide value to its citizens here. So,
Yeah.
I really do believe that.
What do you think about inflation versus deflationary pressures? Things that cause inflation, obviously, are the government printing more and more money, and sometimes the velocity of money can affect that, and whether other countries want to constantly buy our bonds, and that can cause inflation. So it seems like there's clearly a trend towards inflation throughout the last 10 years or so. But then technology seems fundamentally deflationary. It seems like it drives the cost of objects lower and lower and lower, and it gives more access to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I've always heard, I don't understand all the arguments, but technology is deflationary fundamentally. Which force do you think takes on a larger role over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, it's funny because like they actually aren't opposing forces in my opinion, and I know that's weird to say because
Sure,
they're
yeah.
literal polar opposites. But let me see if I can explain it in like a really simple, because I know we're at like the 90-minute mark already. I'm happy to hang on for like as long as you guys want me, but like I don't want to just like drag on this pretty big concept, right?
I feel like we're just getting started. We keep
Yeah,
you here
go
all
for
day.
it.
Yeah,
This is
I got
great.
another like 6
yeah.
hours in me. So okay, so inflation, right? We all intuitively understand inflation. The value of your dollar goes down over time because the prices of things go up over time, right? A burger today costs $15, $17, $18. Back in our parents' or maybe our grandparents' days, the same burger or a similar burger would cost maybe $1.50, 5 cents, depending on how far back you go. Let's talk about the iPhone instead, because iPhone, Android. Let's talk about smartphones instead, right? iPhones haven't gotten too much more expensive, right? That $8.99 to like $12.99, let's say, or whatever, or $7.99 to like $12.99. They've doubled in price. Inflationary, or is it deflationary because today's iPhone is actually like 1,000 times more powerful than the first one? So even though you're paying twice as much, you're getting 1,000 times more compute. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
The iPhone cost, the actual cost has gone up, but the cost per value, the actual value that you get, has gone up more. So what I'm trying to say is our world will never get cheaper. I don't think companies will ever lower their prices. That's not what deflation means. What deflation means is they'll keep prices steady, but you'll get way more for your money. Laptops aren't about to go to zero. You're just going to get way more laptop for the cost of a laptop. So I think the whole idea about UBI and everyone being able to live on $20,000 and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't really make economic sense, because what that implies is every manufacturer of every good and service will lower their prices. And what will actually happen is the opposite. They'll keep prices steady. They might increase their margins a little bit, but you'll fundamentally get more for your money. More craft burgers, more artisanal burgers, like more
Yeah, but why
human.
is it different for an iPhone? Like, why don't I have 100 times bigger hamburger for $15?
Maybe it's more premium meat. Maybe it's, more preservative free ingredients. Maybe it like, I don't have a time machine, so I can't go
Yeah.
back and say like, let me try grandpa's burger and
Yeah, yeah,
understand
yeah.
if the burger has actually changed. But I can tell you with the iPhone example, just because like we grew up, I saw the first iPhone, so I like kind of know what it looks like compared to today's iPhone. The iPhones probably cost like 4 times more money today, adjusting for inflation, right? Like it's twice as expensive, like on paper, and the value of the dollar has gone down by like 2x since the first iPhone, right? Roughly, super back of the envelope numbers, right? You're paying for four times as much for the phone in inflation adjusted dollars, right? but you're getting way more than 4 times the phone of the first iPhone, right? So I think those two, that all I'm trying to point out is you can have inflation, price inflation. We're literally paying more for a phone,
And
and deflation
deflation at the
at
same
the same
time.
time, right? So it's
Mm.
not a trade. It's just deflation happens very, very fast in technology. You're getting much more specs or whatever for the thing. And inflation happens economically. You're actually paying more for the product, right? They can both be true.
Huh.
Interesting.
Does that make sense? Do you
Yeah.
not agree? Like
Yeah,
I'm totally, yeah.
that totally makes sense. I guess I was thinking more in situations where you're able to where companies like let's say there's a bunch of law firms that provide a certain service or tax services, whatever. And I figured out one day, oh wait, I can provide a lot of the services that they do, some of their kind of bread and butter with, I can do that with ChatGPT, and I can do it for maybe even for free and maybe
Yeah.
run some ads or use it as a lead generation thing. Like that's very disruptive to their business. So, I mean, when I'm thinking about deflationary, I'm thinking there's going to be a lot of things like that. So, like, even what we're doing right now, back in the days, you had TV studios to have a conversation like this. Now we're just sitting here. It's extremely inexpensive. So there's like a lot of
Yeah.
pressures like that, which gets a lot of people get a lot more. I guess maybe it's only limited to certain areas, but a lot of people get in information in the digital, at least everything drops.
Yeah.
But
Is this?
even in your example, sorry, Dylan, go ahead.
No. Alex, go ahead. You're on it.
Even in your example, right? Like if let's say I'm a competing law firm, I figured out how to do it all with AI. I'm really sneaky, right? What am I going to do? I'm not going to say, okay, I cost 10% as much as these human lawyers. I'm going to say I'm 10% cheaper, and I'm just going to secretly do everything with AI, and my margins will go through the roof, right? Because I figured out how to do it with API calls that cost pennies instead of lawyers that cost millions, right? Then somebody else is going to come in and say, wait a minute, I figured out how to do it with AI. I'm going to drop the prices a little lower, a little lower. And it's a race to the bottom over time for sure. But in the meantime, you're existing as a hugely profitable software business replacing a physical law firm. You know what I mean? Going back to the McDonald's example, it's the
Oh.
same thing. Not that I'm comparing lawyers to McDonald's, but it's like the McDonald's should be much cheaper to run. So if I just keep my
Oh.
prices the same or even drop them 10%, everyone's coming to me because I'm 10% cheaper, but my margins are 10 times higher. I don't have people. They don't take breaks. It runs
That's crazy.
24/7. There's no health insurance. There's no mandated anything, right? There's no safety standards because there's no people. It's just a window people order and pick up their food. It's 10 times smaller, so I pay less rent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? The economics aren't, so I'm going to slash all my prices so people save money. It's, I'm going to undercut a little bit just to get everyone here, and I keep the profit, right? And if I'm a publicly traded company, my shareholders are the ones that benefit the most,
Mhm.
right? Which goes
Yeah,
back
because
to
the technology in the hamburger is all the way through the line. It's the employees.
all the way, the
It's all
refrigeration, the supply chain,
right.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. You're like the way you take, like if we do like 3D printed meat or something because of technology, it'll be hugely deflationary, even though the price will stay the same. So now, yeah, I just kind of felt like one of those aha moments. I could never quite put my head around what technology being deflationary means. But yeah, replacing all of the people is a big part of that, and their
And
whole
that's a lot of the
system.
cost. Just to drive the point home, you're exactly right. The reason hamburgers cost $18 today is largely because of labor, right? Not just the labor of the building the actual hamburger, but the labor of shipping the meat and the buns and the ingredients to that restaurant. The labor of serving it, the labor of collecting and washing the plates, like all of that is human labor today. So when you're cutting out, when you have self-driving trucks built by Tesla, organizing kitchens, blah, 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 automatic servers and all that kind of stuff. Same thing with Uber, right? You're cutting out, when you go
Yeah.
to a driverless car, you're cutting out the most expensive component, which is the labor, the driver,
And
right?
it's hard to because inflation seems like you print it and it happens across the board. Deflation seems to happen in pockets. Like the iPhone makes sense, but then lawyers don't seem like they've been too deflationary because they're still just humans reading. But if you imagine law firms getting replaced by AI agents, then quickly that deflation will hit the economy through the law
Yeah.
vertical.
Yeah, or maybe not lawyers, right? Like, I don't think doctors are going away tomorrow. I don't think lawyers are going away tomorrow, but maybe paralegals, maybe nurses assistants, maybe just the guy, like, inputting the data. You know what I mean? Like, oh, what's your name? What's your address? Like those kind of like lower level data entry jobs for all of those industries. Maybe those turn into AI agents, right? Maybe the people like doing security don't turn to AI agents, but maybe just the people monitoring cameras and then alerting people, maybe that can be done by an AI agent. So it's not like I don't think every industry will get replaced entirely by AI, but there are a lot of like manual, low level, no brain on tasks associated with everything. Like we all make YouTube videos, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of stuff that we do that it's like doesn't use our brain or our talents. It's just a mechanical thing we have to do as part of the step of making a video. That can definitely be offloaded to an AI agent, right? Check this box, write in this text field, upload the, you know what I mean? Like all that kind of stuff. That's not creative, not,
So
yeah, go ahead.
so if the government prints $1 trillion and then that money goes into R&D and for the most part, some percentage of it ends up becoming better lawyer AI and better mining systems and better hamburgers, then overall it kind of nets out. But if they print that $1 trillion and then they buy the wrong things that aren't innovative, that don't
Yeah.
spur innovation, then we end up with inflation. So it's more, yeah, I
And
guess,
that goes
is that
more to
right?
the question of, hey, do you believe that the government is an efficient capital allocator? Should we be allowing the government to provide X service, Y service, Z marketplace, health insurance, healthcare? Like that gets into the debate of, is the government the right buyer and investor for this kind of thing, or should the industry be
Mhm.
privatized? And obviously that's a case by
Yeah, because
case
once
and
they
a
print
deep
the money,
philosophical. Yeah.
yeah, when you print the money, like, how do you get it to be innovation instead of
And
just go
well, how do
to
you just get it to
random
be effective, right?
bureaucracies?
Like,
Yeah.
if the government has to spend $1 million on a website that somebody else could have built for 100 grand, even though you get the same final product, it was still a bad investment, right?
Hmm.
And the government procurement process and like all these things that are not AI, not deflation, not tied to like our main conversation, but are like, hey, should the government build the roads or should a private company that's really good at building roads do it? And I don't know
Yeah.
the answer, but it's like that's just a separate debate from.
Inflation's basically bureaucracy, and deflation is efficiency.
It's a yeah, that like for sure that's some of it. Some inflation is just natural, right? Like the goal is never 0% inflation. When you produce a better service, for example, you should charge more for it. Like I think it's totally fair that, if I had a course and somebody else had a course and I thought mine was better, it's like, no, I'm actually going to price higher, not lower than this other guy because I feel like I'm providing more value, right? If I'm building a better burger than McDonald's, I feel justified in charging more for my burger, right? So some
Yeah.
inflation just happens naturally as high quality services become everywhere, right? Like here's a great example. 10 years ago, cars didn't have touchscreens. Today, every car has a touchscreen. That diffusion of innovation has brought the cost of all cars up a little bit. You know what I mean? You're just getting more car for your money. So it's like not all inflation is bad, not all deflation is good, but at the end of the day, the price you pay should justify the value you get as a consumer.
Yeah, I guess
And
we got to make sure we separate inflation with like in real terms versus nominal terms, right? Because when we print money, that's just there's more
Sure.
units, so the units go up.
Yeah.
That's not the same as the real cost to produce a good going up. So those are kind of two different things. So with the whole money printing system is weird. We can go down a deep rabbit hole of that because I mean, like the whole that was the whole Bitcoin thesis in the beginning is like, well, who decides how much money we print and how much to debase the currency?
yeah, oh, yeah. Can we talk about crypto? Because like
Yeah,
that's another thing is I was kind of thinking, so there's different forms of value that seem like they're kind of emerging. Like YouTube views, for example, are sort of like a status symbol, or like Labubus, or all these crazy things people spend this time earning, all these video game currencies. And as they become cryptocurrency, they usually trade against the US dollar. So you can somehow like earn in-game credits and then you get a crypto for it. And
Yeah.
then it's sort of exchangeable. Like adding all these new currencies, does that kind of become like I don't know, what happens in a world where there's all these different forms of value that aren't just like the United States dollar?
Nothing. That's the beauty of it, right? So it's like when I was young, I collected Pokemon cards and I traded those cards for US dollars. I sold my Pokemon cards and what I acquired was US dollars, right? Because somebody found value in those Pokemon cards. It's the same argument as hamburgers. It's the same argument. Like the reason World of Warcraft gold farmers make money is because somebody finds that gold valuable. They're getting a better experience in their game, and they're willing to pay real world currency that they earned for better experience in what they consider entertainment, right? It's just like you going to the movies. You pay for a ticket, you get something you don't get to keep. It's purely digital. You walk out of the theater, you have nothing more than what you walked in except an experience, right? People pay for experiences. Experiences provide real value. Some of that is holding a Labubu. Some of that is playing with better Pokemon cards. Some of that is having more gold in your World of Warcraft account. Full stop. The unit of economics is the US dollar, right? And then how you trade that dollar for value is up to you.
But the incentives change a little bit. Like if you want more Starbucks points, you need to go into one of their locations and buy a coffee. Whereas if I want more dollars, I have to, I guess, get a job or create something of value. It just seems more broad and one's more specific. So maybe all these forms of value will just become like the different chips that you were saying are specializing in hardware to do certain things, but there's still the GPUs at the end of the day kind of running. Like is the US dollar the GPU and the ASICs are all the cryptos? I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. I feel like in this situation, it's like the human is the GPU and they're doing work, and then where they get to spend their tokens or their output is like up to them, right? So it's like I don't know what the perfect analogy is, but like the big idea is like the nice thing about like a fiat currency is it's just a representative of like purchasing power, right? It's like I did something of value, I got rewarded in something that I get to spend this symbolic thing on instead of more time, right? Somebody else farmed that World of Warcraft gold for me. Somebody else already procured that Charizard card. Somebody found that rare Labubu. I want to skip that, and I'm willing to trade you this economic power to do that so that you can go spend that economic power on this thing you want to do, right? So like I think the reason the dollar works isn't just because it's like a unit of account. It's because it's a store of value. Not all cryptocurrencies are store of value, but some people find some cryptocurrencies valuable. Just like nobody would ever store their bank account in World of Warcraft gold, even if they were like, I'm the best World of Warcraft player. That's like a crazy thing to do. It's just valuable to you because you enjoy the experience of being a gajillionaire in World of Warcraft, right? So it's like all comes back to the dollar. I don't think like no matter how many things you can trade the dollar for, the fundamental question goes back to like earlier discussions we had about like money printing, quantitative easing, all the stuff that like devalues the dollar, because that's the fundamental thing getting traded in all of these other examples. I don't care what the price of World of Warcraft gold is today, tomorrow, yesterday, because I don't buy it. But everybody should care about the price of the dollar.
Yeah, and I think 2020 was a big wake-up call for a lot of people that realized, like, yeah, okay, these dollars, they're not really money. It's currency. It's a medium of exchange. Probably shouldn't hold on to it for long periods of time, expecting it to keep its value. And people started realizing, like, okay, like I got to start thinking assets. I got to start thinking, um, how did you phrase it? A holder of value.
Store of value.
Store of value, basically store of value. That's why so much went to Bitcoin, etc. At the time, there was this place that would buy and sell online businesses and money generating websites. And so if you had a website that got SEO traffic, which is somewhat consistent, usually now it might be a little bit different, but so let's say it's making $1,000 a month from AdSense, you would expect to get some monthly sort of multiplier based on that. I think at the time it was like 12 months. So basically, if you're making 1,000 a month on this website, you can sell it for 12,000 on this marketplace. People bid on it. And from 2020, so like from 2019 to 2022, you saw those multiples just skyrocket, right? Because it went from like 12 to, and back in the days, it was like 6. So back in 2012, it was like 6 months. So if you had a website that was making $1,000, you could sell it for 6,000. Then by 2019, it was like 12. And then by 2022, I think it was like 18, 24, etc. So I actually purchased a few of those, ran it, kind of flipped it. But you saw in real time, everybody get this awareness of like, wait, I need to get out of the dollar and get something that's either generating money or is a store of value. But it's like everybody got like this speed run in economic understanding
Yeah.
in
And just to be
2020.
clear, you're also describing the stock market, right?
Oh,
You know,
I mean, that was the biggest example, right? Yeah.
yeah. It's like, companies are valued based on multiples of their annual revenue, right? Which is literally what you just described about the websites, except monthly instead of annual. But it's fundamentally the same thing. The price to earnings ratio, the price to sales ratio, these are all just multiples of top line revenue versus bottom line profits or whatever. So fundamentally the same thing.
Yeah.
Which
Wow.
is the fun part about, like, one of the things that's cool about running and investing in AI channel is putting all of the discussions that we just had throughout this podcast together, right? It's like, hey, how does Meta Platforms' giant store of data turn into revenue?
Hmm.
Is like a fundamental it's like, I obviously don't know the whole answer, but it's like, if you can figure out how these intangible things like data, algorithms, investments in these AI chips, blah, 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 will turn into more revenue tomorrow. And you can kind of guess, hey, here's how much revenue I think they'll make based on the way I see everyone else making revenue. You can make a lot of money by figuring out which companies to bet on before the rest of the market sees that on their balance sheet.
Who
Does that
is
make sense?
the
Like,
Yeah.
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 Who is the Indian version of Warren Buffett? You know who I'm talking about? The guy with the mustache.
oh
What's
my
his
gosh.
name? It'll come to us.
Yeah. Sorry, it's like right on the tip of my tongue too.
Yeah, me too, me too. But anyway, so yeah, I remember when Meta just dropped up off a cliff because of the Apple cookie policy, privacy, whatever. Starts with a P. Well, whatever. But no,
Yeah.
anyways, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that's going to be an easy double." And I remember sitting there because like so Metastock just cratered at that time,
Mm-hmm.
and he went, "Oh,
Manish Pabrai.
what's it? Manish Pabrai?"
Yeah,
Oh
I
yeah,
think so.
yeah, that guy's. It's always fun to see his face on thumbnail.
Yeah.
Yes. But yeah, no, I mean he like I remember he's like, "Oh yeah, that's an easy double. I'm investing my money into Meta." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." But man, I mean, since then more than doubled, obviously. And it was just like, man, to be able to have that sort of level of insight where he's just like so just like yep, buy would be absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
So one thing I do want to touch really fast because
Sure.
earlier we talked about AI replacing jobs, and you talked about how you are seeing an augmentation of your efforts, of your abilities with AI. That's what a lot of people are seeing it. So yesterday, actually, I shot a video. I haven't published it yet, but where Dario Amodei again is in the news saying, hey, this is going to wipe out entry level jobs by 2030. So he's saying by 2030, it's going to gut. Last time he said bloodbath. Now he's saying it's going to gut entry level jobs. So he's got like really strong words for it.
Yeah.
Anthropic, his company, they have the Anthropic Economic Index that keeps track of a lot of this stuff. So actually, I decided to just deep dive into it and take a look. There was a Stanford study that was published about this. There was a WEF study that was Economic Forum that was published about this. And it's interesting because what you're describing is 100% true for most people. This augments their ability. It's not replacing them. It helps them, except for one small segment of society where it's is gutting and eliminating those jobs, and that is the 22 to 25-year-olds that are fresh college graduates going into these white collar jobs. So we're talking about, like you said, clerks, ticket
You
sales,
right. Right.
all of that stuff, and it's really brutal because it's that little the people that are like the interns and stuff like that. You just see it from 22, so from
Man.
2022. So this wasn't COVID, this wasn't
Yeah.
something else.
It
It was
was Chat GPT
Chat
basically, right?
GPT, and you see this,
Yeah.
and it's correlated directly to the use of these LLMs in their field. So I guess it's kind of like, on one hand, good news because it's like, okay, most of us are fine. This is great. Most of society isn't affected. But if you think about it, man, is that a really horrible segment of society to cut half of the jobs for? Because that's like what they need to get on the right career path. That's what they need to get rent and move out of their parents' places and like start their career. Like, what do you guys think about
Man.
that? I mean, it's a small segment, but
But that
man,
generation just got so screwed, like
yeah.
learning through Zoom through COVID and then
Hmm.
getting
Yeah.
stuck with like not good entry jobs. Like, I
But
don't
that
know.
seems like a
I
big
think
deal.
I think So there's no answer that looks like an older version of this problem, right? The answer isn't, oh, just go get a different job or whatever.
Hmm.
Like, I don't have any unsympathetic, like, vague answer to say. I think industries will naturally shift, right?
Yeah.
I think if you can't get an entry level job, one of the things you can try to do is create one, right? So, like, creating a YouTube channel is free. I'm not saying everyone gets out of the hole by creating a YouTube channel, but create your own service. Learn to use AI yourself and create like a digital product,
Yeah.
or learn to use AI to learn the skills to not have an entry level position, build a portfolio of work and like try to get into the next level position that didn't get cut. I acknowledge that it's like really, really tough to exit college and then realize that a large language model is doing things that you thought you would be doing for pennies on the dollar.
Hmm.
But the answer has to be out there. It can't just be like, oh, I guess we're not hiring 22-year-olds. It has to be something like, oh, I'm about to grind really hard and do something that my peers aren't doing to stand apart. My version of that, it was like right after the '07, '08 crash. We were all interns. So the first thing I did, I'm an electrical engineer by training, is I just set up a little website with a little portfolio of my dinky, crappy circuit designs, web designs, like a few web pages I've built, just like little portfolio. And that little portfolio got me every internship I applied to because no one else had one. I don't know what the version of that is today, and I'm not suggesting it's easy. But if you can build a little online portfolio that your peers aren't doing, now at least you're in the running against everyone else who is. So it's like I do think it sucks that like the
Hmm.
people who are getting displaced the most are the entry level. They're the ones trying to get in the workforce in the first place. I don't think the workforce is going to look the same in 20 years as it does today, and I'm
Yeah.
not so sure that the best thing to do 20 years from now is still get a college degree,
Right.
Mhm.
or get a programming degree or whatever, like the what becomes a marketable skill and a good resume constantly changes over time, right?
Yeah, maybe these are the hard times that make great generations. Maybe they
Totally.
figure out a whole new way to just think about entrepreneurship and
Yeah.
what the world needs from them.
Yeah.
Interesting. But you
And
guys are
I'm
not.
not saying that to be unsympathetic, right? It's just like one of those, this happens in every major technology cycle, right? I
Right.
can't imagine how many people were replaced by a smartphone. I can't imagine how many people were replaced by personal computers and tractors and automobiles and you know what I mean? Down and down the list, right? Like it happened before. It's a bigger scale every time, and it's gonna happen again after AI too. AI is not the last time this will happen.
Yeah, this might be the big, it might happen faster. It might happen just, I mean, it might be bigger and faster, but it's not, you're saying it's
Yeah.
not going to be different from the previous times. It's going to have just the magnitude is going to be, but not the end
Yeah.
result. We just have to figure out
I
how
mean,
to,
the printing press just crushed every information industry ever, right
yeah,
before that, you know what I mean? So it's like, uh, if it and it starts happening too fast, four-year degrees no longer make sense. It's like by the time you exit what you entered,
Yeah, the
the
world
world is
doesn't
so
even look the
different,
same.
you know what I mean? So it's like
yes.
now maybe
Yeah.
college isn't the answer. Maybe there's an AI version of trade school, right? It's like we're gonna teach you a craft and a skill that's associated with AI that doesn't look like a college degree. It looks more like a welding or a plumbing or an electrician, but for tokens instead of electricity or what, like I don't know what the answer is, but like for sure, if the industry isn't working the same way, the education for that industry has to change as well, right?
Yeah, it always
Yeah.
made more sense to me to have lifelong learning rather than here's like this first part of your life. Like if we can have
Totally.
it continuous somehow built in, opening I just
Learning
found,
on the job,
yeah, learning on the job.
training and inferring at the same time, right? Back
Bingo.
to,
They're yeah,
you know what I
just
mean?
like large language models. Exactly. OpenAI just released their thing where they have almost like a LinkedIn competitor, but also they're going to have a
Oh,
free
cool.
online course for that will be taught by AI to use AI tools. And I think Walmart is for some reason one of the biggest sort of partners in this that they're going to train up the Walmart workforce to use AI. So have you guys heard about this?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I saw the headlines.
yeah, so it's going to be pretty interesting. So AI being taught by AI to people not necessarily in tech positions, but like people working at Walmart across all levels. So maybe that's going to be a good first step. Although I'm sure some people are worried that it's like they're like disrupting, they're causing the problem and creating the solution at the same time. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So
All right. I think that's probably a pretty good podcast. If you guys, unless there's anything else you wanted to chat about, Alex, I think we've taken a ton of your time, and thank you so much
Thank
for,
you so much.
yeah, like these are such great conversations, and it's fascinating to see the way that you think, and your channel's done a lot of great um, education for a lot of people. I'm sure a lot of people have more stable portfolios now because of you and have thought more about 401ks and long-term investing. And yeah.
Guys,
Can we
I
just
really appreciate it. Oh, go ahead.
I'm so
Sorry.
sorry. Just rapid fire. You can't give investment advice, but what do you think are some strong companies? I mean, Nvidia. You mentioned AMD. Like where just like it's
Versus
always
Bitcoin.
versus Bitcoin. Yeah.
Yeah, Bitcoin, gold, Nvidia. How do you just rank the top 10 or whatever, or
Yeah,
stuff
I
that you
mean,
think is all good?
I don't invest in crypto. I don't have a fundamental anything against it, but I like businesses with balance sheet that generate cash flows and things that I can understand. So I stick to sort of AI infrastructure, software, and hardware.
Yes.
That's my bread and butter because that happens to be my background. And just like Warren Buffett says, you want to invest in things you know inside your circle of competence.
Hmm.
That just happens to be mine, right? I got really lucky. So for me, it's going to be like Nvidia, Broadcom, Palantir. I definitely am an investor in AMD, although not as much anymore. I'm definitely looking into Oracle after all the crazy news there.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, I think cybersecurity, with all the data happening because of AI, is going to explode. So I'm a big believer in
Yep.
companies like CrowdStrike. So basically that whole value chain, starting from server infrastructure, your Broadcoms, your Vertivs, like even the water cooling side of things, all the way up to like the chip designers, ARM, Nvidia, Broadcom, all the way up to the hyperscalers that use them, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and I'm starting to include Meta platforms in that list, and then all the way to the software companies on top of that, your OpenAIs, your Palantirs, etc. That's kind of what I think is the best bang for your buck right now, because I think the AI party is just getting started. I think, we all are very familiar with like the terms and terminologies of AI because we create content on it, we live, breathe, eat, sleep it. But the average person, I think, still has only prompted ChatGPT a few times and put it down thinking it's a fad. So I think we're very early to the party. I think the best use cases are still in front of us, not behind us. And I think there's a lot more room for innovation uh, in the near, medium, and far term. So I'm holding on to these stocks for years, if not decades.
Agreed. That's phenomenal, and thank you so much, yeah, for letting us know that. That definitely sounds like a great thesis. I'm trying to pick up a little bit more of those companies myself, where possible. So thank you so much for being here. This was an incredible conversation, and of course, you're welcome back anytime. We'll link all the channels, everything for you down below, so people can check it out. If you haven't seen the channel, I'm sure everybody has seen it, but you haven't, check it out. They go deep into Nvidia and everything what we just talked about. So if you're interested in that, definitely check out Alex's channel. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see everybody next time.